the Global Energy Leaders Podcast, episode 86.
Welcome to the Global Energy Leaders Podcast, powered by R Squared Global.
Welcome to another edition of the Global Energy Leaders Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Ray. So good to have you. And today we talk about biomass. And we bring on Irvin from Global ReFuel to talk to us about how biomass technology is actually helping chicken farmers, not only here in the U.S., but around the world. Would love to hear your thoughts on this, which leads me to the question of the day. Are you excited about the potential for biomass technology as it's being deployed in the U.S. and abroad? It seems that there is some biomass stuff that is really, really useful, and it really reduces costs. I would love to hear your thoughts. Ryan at globalenergymedia.com. That's Ryan at globalenergymedia.com. A little bit about Rocky and Global ReFuel. Rocky Irving is a co-founder of the Texas startup Biofuels, and he was you'll hear, a former chicken farmer. And so be sure to check out their company, and we will link to everything in the show notes. Without further ado, here is Rocky Irvin from Global ReFuel. Well, Rocky, it's a great day here in Texas. It's great to have you on the show. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm great, Ryan. How are you today?
Doing well. It is a little bit warm over here. I'm a little bit further west than where you are in the state, but we're almost at the end of summer when we're recording this, and so you can see the end of the 100 degree days approaching, I think, and so that's always exciting.
That's always a welcome sight in Texas, I promise you.
Well, let's get into it. First off, we're going to talk about biomass and farming and a lot of stuff today, but I want to talk about biomass and what kind of got you interested in using biomass as a fuel source.
Okay, I'm a poultry grower in Northeast Texas, and I've been growing chickens now for about 11 years. And when I first started, went into it not really knowing a whole about the industry and the process of growing birds. But as most growers who grow poultry under contract for one of the primary integrators, or one of the integrators across the country, like a Tyson's or a Pilgrim's Pride or one of those guys, I learned very quickly that a lot of my profits were basically literally being burned up in terms of the fossil fuel or propane gas in my case that I was having to purchase to heat the farms. The farming process requires a lot of heat to be generated on the farm. When birds are brought on site, a flock, as you'd call it, on day one, it's required to be 90 degrees inside those barns. Poultry barns are, for those listeners who don't follow the poultry industry or don't know a whole lot about it, basically a poultry house is a huge barn that's enclosed, generally ranging in from 12,000 to about 24,000 square feet, and they require a lot of energy to heat them and keep them cool. In the wintertime, we rely on a heater system currently called, or traditionally known as, a brooder heating system, and those heaters require a lot of propane gas. As when I was going to mention just a minute ago, when the birds come in on day one, it's required to be 90 degrees inside the houses, regardless of whether it's 5 degrees outside or 75 degrees outside. That those houses have to be that temperature, and that generates a lot of need for propane gas. You might not even think about it, but even on a day like today, maybe not necessarily today, but in some summertime days when growers receive a flock of birds, it may be 85 or 90 degrees outside, but at night it may dip down to the lower 70s. So as a result, they would still have to burn some propane gas for heating over the nighttime hours. So for me, it was all about the reason I was looking at biomass was trying to figure out how to use some form of alternative heating source.
Right, and so you mentioned that your profits are being, kind of burned away because you were, having to heat these houses, and so you turned to biomass, and I'm guessing you get that directly from the flock themselves.
Yes, the actual what our technology does, Ryan, is different from most biomass systems, and our furnace is very unique in that it uses poultry litter as the biomass fuel to heat the barns. It requires just a little bit of gas to start the process, and once the process begins, the system runs 24/7 as needed to provide heat for the barns from the biomass fuel litter from the barns.
Okay, and one last question on this. I want to talk about kind of farming in general because we don't cover farming a lot on the show, as you can imagine. So just kind of help the listeners better understand the industry and the need for a product like this. But is it kind of a 1-to-1 ratio? I know you said you had a little bit of gas to get it started, but does one flock kind of self-sustain their heat once you get them in there, or is there even kind of an excess that maybe you could sell or store for later?
As the flock matures in age, so on day one, the heating requirement is to be 90 degrees inside the barn. As the flock ages, day over day, over about every 3 days, that desired temperature is computer controlled. It goes down about 1 degree per day. So as the birds get older, they produce their own heat, and eventually, after around 30 days, regardless of the temperature outside, by and large, they heat themselves by virtue of the BTUs that they put off. But in that first 30 days, particularly first 21 days, there's a huge demand for fossil gas or propane fuel. And what our system does is it generates the heat, all the heat requirements that are there for the farm during that first 30 days.
Gotcha. Okay, so let's step back now. I think we kind of got a grasp of what the system does, but the farming chicken business, if you will, it would seem that, with natural gas prices as low as they are right now, that maybe there's not a need for a product like this, but you were saying earlier that there is. Kind of walk us through maybe how a farmer may look at something like this, and how much savings are we actually looking at for someone with in the chicken farming business?
Sure. The chicken business is a tough business, and so over the last 20 years, there have been very little pay raise or very little increase in pay for chicken growers' products, live chickens. So the chicken grower is responsible for providing the facility, the utilities, and the labor for the raising of that flock of birds. And the grower provides the chicken, and the baby chicks of the chickens, and the feed. So the cost input for fuel is, as you mentioned, propane has come down, or natural gas prices have come down over the last few years. When I first started looking into this situation, they were much higher. But at the end of the day, even with the low cost that we're seeing now, our system still dollars out. It has an ROI of about 3.5 to 4 years, depending on the part of the country that you're in. But the propane savings or gas savings are not the only aspect of our system that delivers economic value to the grower. So our system virtually eliminates the use of gas or natural gas or propane. But what it also does is it delivers. The way that it works is basically a large central heating unit. And so on the farm, you'll install basically a pole barn, about a 40 by 60 or 40 by 70 between a couple of these big chicken house barns. And underneath that pole barn is the system, the PLF 500, which is a patented biomass system. It has ductwork that runs to and from the chicken houses. And also into that pole barn is a supply of litter that's used for fuel for that 30-day period that I talked about at the beginning of the flock. So the way that the system works is it pulls air through a HVAC system, and it pulls air from the barns, and it reheats the air, sends it basically through a plenum, and heats that air up to about 75 degrees above the temperature that's pulling in, and pushes that warmer air back into the barns, warm, dry air. And that dry air does a lot of things. It virtually eliminates ammonia inside the houses, which is a big issue from an animal welfare or bird health perspective. It reduces moisture and humidity, which makes the inside conditions of that house a lot more favorable to raising livestock. So in raising a bird, the less stress that you can put on that bird during that grow-out period, the better they grow, the faster they grow, and the less feed they consume to put on the same weight. So as a result, the grower sees an increase in profit because they grow a better bird. They see a reduction in cost because they virtually eliminate the cost for ammonia-controlled chemicals, as well as fresh bedding that they have to replace on a regular basis. They get the gas savings. And so overall, our system develops a byproduct ash. So for every ton of ash, or basically there's about an 80% reduction in the from litter to the ash byproduct. And that ash byproduct, the grower can sell that back to us, Global ReFuel, for a profit of about twice what they're selling their litter for today. So there's another income stream that the grower realizes. So when you add it all up, like I mentioned a minute ago, the payback is ROI is about 3.5 to 4 years, but a grower can see a immediate bottom line improvement of somewhere between 20 and 70% on their farm, which is a huge impact given the economic condition that we've seen on the farm for the last couple of decades.
Right. Even if the conditions weren't tight, that would still be a nice, increase in profit. So, real quick, just help me out here. I know you mentioned chickens. Would this system work for any other type of a farm, or is it just designed for a chicken house type setup?
Our current business model has us pointed primarily at the broiler market. So the table meat, chicken nuggets, those kind of things that are by and large our focus area. But yes, our technology would work on other poultry operations, has the potential to work in the swine industry as well as other livestock industries as well.
Okay, and one final question just about it in general, just before we move on to some of the technology you guys use. I know we have a lot of listeners from around the globe. Are you selling this product overseas where, fuel costs could be, just, tremendously burdensome on some of our African listeners, or our South American listeners? Are you able to sell this outside the U.S., or is it only in the U.S. right now?
Absolutely. Our business model shows us to focus on the U.S., but we had a lot of interest from Central and South America, particularly on power generation. Our future iteration of this technology would have a bolt-on or include some form of a power gen station that would allow those poultry growers in those areas of the world to take advantage of a much more reliable power source than they have today, and also lower their costs, as well as in Canada, where it's a lot colder conditions there than what we have here in the U.S. in the grower belt. We've had a lot of interest there. So yes, in the future we expect to go worldwide.
Right. Well, that sounds exciting. I want to talk a little bit about the technology you guys are using, specifically with monitoring and how are you guys able to monitor, the temperature? Are you using just is it sent back to you guys? Is it sent to the farmers? Is the system you have to go out and check the system itself? How is the farmer going to know that the system's working properly and it's not malfunctioning?
So our system is 100% PLC controlled, and with that, the advent of the technologies that are out there today, we can basically set the machine up to tell us or send us text message or email message of whenever something, some parameters out that we set up in terms of air being delivered or some system or subsystem on the unit that's trending toward failure. So we have all kinds of means to let the grower know that the system is working properly, or let them know whenever there's an area or motor or something on the system that's trending toward failure.
Now, I know some of the startups that you see today, they're using the big data or Internet of Things, and they're looking at how to make a product like this more efficient. Have y'all been able to incorporate some of that type of technology as well, so that as you continue to go down this path, you can say, okay, well, you know what? If we tweak this here, if we do this here, we can actually increase our savings more.
Absolutely. We're currently the system is not integrated with the farm. I mentioned a moment ago that the temperature in a farm or in the houses is computer controlled throughout the life cycle of the flock. That's the standalone system that's in the houses, and our system is standalone. But they do complement one another. In the future, we hope to tie into the computer systems that are in the houses, integrate some data points that are coming from there into some data points that we're generating, and take advantage of both sets of data to eventually create the most pristine growing environment possible for a flock.
It's interesting. I was talking to someone earlier today and about some power needs in Africa. And one thing that I pointed out is that the folks in Africa know better than anyone else exactly what they need. And it sounds like what you guys have done is that you know better than anybody else, what a chicken farmer might need, and you've been able to develop a technology around that. And it's exciting for a lot of reasons. But I think what you guys have done here is you take something that's, and sometimes this kind of gets overlooked as we look at inventing new technologies or new energy sources, is we forget that sometimes the fuel that we need is just right there beside us.
Absolutely. In the case here, back when I first started looking at this, I knew that there had to be. This was back in the 2010 to 2011 time frame. I knew there had to be someone working on a technology similar to this. There were just too many advantages around it, including the fact that a ton of poultry litter has the equivalent of 67 gallons of propane in it. The trick is to extract that energy. So I started searching for anyone out there at colleges or universities who have poultry science schools or businesses that were working on a technology like this. And lo and behold, I found one and reached out to them, and they were making some progress on the combustion aspect or the combustion process. But then they started having some issues around the material handling side, which is, you're taking this raw product from the litter barns or from the barns, and you need to create a consistent biomass, consistent moisture content, consistent form factor, and they were having some issues around that area. And so lo and behold, over time, it got to the point where they kind of threw their hands up and they were ready to go back and focus on some of their core businesses. And I was just in a position to take the project forward. Found some former contacts who had a lot of experience in the material handling, particularly in the coal industry. And those guys came on board and were able to solve the material handling issues and take the project forward.
Well, Rocky, this sounds like an amazing product. And I know our listeners, especially those, obviously we have a lot in the U.S., but those around the world, this might be something that can solve some of their needs because, here in the U.S., sometimes maybe if you're outside the chicken farming business, but, we kind of take for granted the access to power. But a product like this seems like it could really be beneficial, not only to the chicken farmers here in the U.S., but folks around the world. So best of luck to you guys in the future. Where can folks find out more about what you guys have going on if they want to reach out and connect with you?
They should check out our website, Ryan, at www.globalrefuel.com. That's GLOBALREFUEL.com, globalrefuel.com. Check us out on the web. Take a look at our opportunities out there to participate in our startup, and we'd love to hear from them.
Absolutely. And for the listeners, we will link to that in the show notes so you can go check that out. And, of course, you can find that at globalenergymedia.com. Rocky, thank you so much for coming on today. We enjoyed the discussion, and best of luck to you guys in the future.
Thank you very much, Ryan. Appreciate your time.
The Global Energy Leaders podcast is produced by Michael Sims and Chris Prine. Chris Prine also serves as editor for the Global Energy Leaders podcast. Until next time, keep climbing.
Thanks for listening to the Global Energy Leaders podcast, powered by R Squared Global.